Quick warning, if you are selling your house in DFW right now, buyers are getting about a 7.3% discount off of the original list price. If you price your home like it's still a peak seller's market, you're about to get an expensive lesson. In the next few minutes, I'm going to go over the three main areas that are driving this big price discount: supply, demand, and of course, pricing. And stay towards the end. I'm going to go over a strategy that you can use to help protect your net profit. And buyers, I'm going to help you out with a simple strategy to help you get the most out of your negotiations. This is your January 2026 real estate market update. Hey, before I get started, quick disclaimer here. Real estate market data is usually a month behind if you're doing it right, because that's how it gets the most accurate. However, if you'd like a little bit more timely information that's happening right now, check me out on Instagram and give me a follow there. I give you weekly market updates so you can stay on top of what's happening in the market in real time. Also, if any of this gets you curious about whether you should be buying or selling right now, my contact information is in the description below. Schedule a quick intro call. I promise it's no pressure. I just want to help understand your situation and see if the timing might be right for you. I always think we need to start by understanding what's happening to the number of total homes for sale in the market. This is the first half of your supply-demand economics. So looking at this graph here, we can see that over the last couple months, really since the peak in July, we can see that the total number of homes for sale has dropped by almost 15,000 homes. However, when we look at the actual total number of homes for sale, we are up 0.7% from the same time last year. Just over 40,000 homes for sale. This year, we've seen more homes for sale than any other year in DFW's history. There's two main factors that go into total homes for sale. And the first is new listings. How many homes are actually coming onto the market? You can see that this graph rises and falls pretty dramatically depending on the season. At our peak earlier this year in April, there was 20,287 homes that came onto the market for sale. And last month, only 9,511 came onto the market for sale. This is a big part of why you see that total number of homes dropping. There's a lot fewer homes coming on the market for sale. In fact, we're down 0.5% from the same time last year. Relatively, that's pretty flat, but we can still see there's a decline in the total number of homes for sale. The second biggest factor affecting total number of homes for sale here in DFW is the number of closings. So how many homes are actually completing the sale? And as you can see, this is also a very seasonal number. From our peak back in May, which we got just over 11,600 homes sold, last month in December, it was only about 9,667. You can see as one of the few months in the year, the total number of homes that sold, 9,667, was more than the number of homes that had come onto the market, which was only 9,511. If we go back to the number of closings, this was actually up from the same time last year. We're going to talk a little bit about why that is when we get to our demand section. When talking about supply, I also like to talk about the time it takes to sell, because the longer it takes to sell, the longer the house is going to sit on the market, adding to our total number of inventory. We are at an all-time high. Well, really since 2012. Right now in DFW, we are at 74 average days on market. So we're getting close to 2.5 months that it takes for a seller to get a contract from a buyer. This is up 10.4% from the same time last year. Obviously, if this trend continues, it's going to start taking a very long time to sell your house here in DFW if you don't have the right strategy. So the next piece of this puzzle is demand. Now, we're talking about buyer demand here in DFW. There's three main stats I like to demonstrate when I'm talking about buyer demand. The first is pending sales. This is a measure of buyer intent. These buyers aren't just looking, they're actually making offers and getting them accepted. So you can see from the graph here, again, we peaked in April, and since then it has been a slow decline in pending sales, with last month only 7,256 homes going pending. This is still up from last year though. So just like our closed sales are up from last year, our pending sales are up too, which means our January numbers coming up next month might actually still be up from the previous year as well. The next number I like to talk about is shows per listing. This is an average of the total number of showings divided by the total number of listings. So it's not saying every listing got this number of showings. It's just an average across the market of how many showings were there per each listing. This is a great measure of the current buyer pool. So the lower this number, the lower number of buyers per listing there are, and the higher the number, obviously, the more buyers per listing there are. We've seen this continue to drop month over month since about March. This is a slightly seasonal number as well, as you can see, but it has less seasonality and has a lot more to do with affordability. December only having 3 shows per listing is down 3.2% from last year. If shows per listing measures the current buyer pool, Shows to pending is actually measuring the current intent of that buyer pool. How likely are they to make an offer? The higher this number means the more showings you need to get an offer. The lower this number, obviously, the less amount of showings. This number, 14.1 shows to pending, is up 2.9% from last year. Now, this goes kind of in hand with what we're seeing here. We have a lower buyer pool and they have a less likely chance of that buyer actually submitting an offer. So you need more showings to get that offer right now. The last number that really sums up supply and demand in one number here is one of my favorites to watch. This is your months of supply across the market. Now, this is down 2.4% from last year at 4.1 months. A lot of times when you hear an economist or an expert talk about a buyer's versus a seller's market, this is the number they're referencing. Right around 6, right in the middle, 6 months of supply is typically known as a neutral market. We actually got really close to that back in July at 5.7, and since then it's been dropping. What this is really measuring is the total number of homes for sale divided by the buyer demand, meaning how fast are these things moving off the market. The lower the number, the better it is for sellers. The higher the number, the better it is for buyers. The way this is trending matters. So if it's trending down towards sellers, even though the number might be more favorable for buyers than it was a few months ago, it might start feeling a little bit more like a seller's market, and vice versa. If it's trending up, buyers are going to feel like they're more in control. So what's really been affecting this over the last couple months, in my opinion, is the interest rate drops that have been happening last month in December. If we take a look at Mortgage News Daily, it's one of my favorite places to get mortgage news updates. I'm showing the last couple months, and so in October, we were sitting right around 6.4% for your standard conventional loan. FHA loans are always a little bit lower, depending on how much you're putting down your credit score, but the average was about 6.4% for your 30-year conventional loan. Since beginning of December, which is right about December 8th, as you can see from this graph, we've seen this drop. So it was at 6.4, right around there, and it dropped all the way down to about 6.2. Doesn't sound like a lot, but every little bit of drop, every 0.1% could be $50 to $100 a month in savings for your typical buyer. I want to start with the beginning, original list price. This is the price that sellers come onto the market with. The median price here is about $357, and it's down 5.8% from last year. The average is at $485,000, and it's also down, but only 1.5% from last year. Now, whenever I talk about pricing, I like to also remove seasonality, and I can do this by putting 12 months of data points into one. And when you do this, you can see a very slow, gradual rise up in average sales price over the last couple of years. In fact, we're up 2.3% from this time last year when I average out the seasonality. If I go back to the median price, well, that tells a little bit different story, but you can still tell that it's been rising over the last couple of years. We're down a little bit versus this time last year, but if the interest rates keep doing what they're doing, that will probably change pretty quick. Next up is the discount off of the original sales price that buyers are getting. It's right around 7.3% right now, which is down from this time last year, meaning it's getting a bigger discount. So if you're a buyer, you know that when a house you like hits the market, more than likely it will drop in price at some point. And sellers, knowing this, you might want to think about adjusting your price before you get on the market. That way you're ahead of the game. And lastly is the actual sales price. So for original sales price minus the discount is your actual sales price. And the median right now across DFW is $355,000, which is down 5.3% last year, with the average at $458,000, down about 3.8% from last year. Now, again, this is month to month. If I remove the seasonality, you're seeing very much like that original list price, this curve is just gradually going up. If the interest rates keep doing what they're doing, we might see this increase next year. Going back to the median to finish it off, as you can see, another fairly flat curve that's down a little bit versus this time last year. If you're a buyer right now, and if you're one of my clients, the advice I'm giving you is to focus on homes that have been on the market 60 or 90 days or more. These are sellers who are starting to get a little bit more desperate and they're willing to make a deal. They're realizing their pricing is off and they're ready to pay for it now. This is where you start finding sellers who are actually willing to negotiate, give you price breaks or seller concessions to help pay for your closing costs, and also be very reasonable in repairs as well. I recently just negotiated with one of my clients, a seller giving them $14,400 towards their closing costs, which is the max they could have given, and very negotiable on making sure that the house was functional, replacing the roof and fixing the HVAC and a few other various things. If you find the right house and the right seller, there's a lot of great deals out there for you as a buyer. If you're a seller, especially if you have been on the market 60, 90 or more days, now might be a great time to think about pausing your listing. I know this sounds very counterintuitive, but as a time-tested strategy, you pull your listing off and you reevaluate it. You maybe take 30 or 60 days and you do some of your minor repairs you've been holding off on, you restage the home, you take new photographs, and you come back on the market in a spring market that will hopefully be much more favorable for you. If you'd like to talk a little bit more about this strategy, my contact information is in the description below. Or if you'd like to check out a video I just did on my 8-week listing prep timeline, click here and you can check that out.